Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today, checking out this new album from Alice Cooper, The Revenge of Alice Cooper. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. The Revenge of Alice Cooper was just released on July 25th, and while this is the 30th Alice Cooper album overall, it's only the 8th album with the original Alice Cooper band, and it's the first album with the Alice Cooper band since Muscle of Love in 1973. The seeds were planted back in 2021 for this new album when all the surviving members of the band got together to record 3 tracks for Alice's new album, Detroit Stories. So you got Dennis Dunaway on bass, you've got Michael Bruce on guitar, and Neil Smith on drums. Unfortunately, Glenn Buxton died back in 1997, but they were able to find 2 unused guitar tracks from him to use on this new album. So you've got all of the original members of the band on The Revenge of Alice Cooper. They just took those unused guitar tracks and built the songs around that. Also back to produce the new album is Bob Ezrin, which Bob has a long-standing history with both Alice Cooper Band and Alice as a solo artist. He produced some of their classic albums like Love It to Death, Killer, School Is Out. He did $1 Billion Babies. He also produced 11 of Alice's solo albums, including what I think is probably his best solo album, Welcome to My Nightmare. And this album is decades in the making. It's been over 50 years since the band has recorded together, and ever since Detroit Stories, it's been rumored that this album was eventually coming. With the new album, the band is looking to recapture that magic that they had in the 70s that helped them create, I think, some of the best albums of that decade. And on first listen, it was very clear that the band intended to have this album to have a very strong 70s sound to it. And while it's not as good as those albums they made earlier in their career, I think they succeeded in making a very solid album. I think Bob's production style played a big role in shaping the sound that the band had on those early albums. And with The Revenge of Alice Cooper, I think he did a really good job at recreating that soundscape on this album. And to be honest, I was a little surprised at how much chemistry the band has, after not recording an album together in over 50 years. I think it really kind of goes to show the kind of quality of musicians that you have on this album. And as you expect, Alice brings his signature theatrical edge to these songs, even though I don't think they quite always land the way he intended them to. So the album's pretty long. There's 16 tracks on the full album. If you look at the vinyl version of it, there's only 14 tracks on that one, but the album comes in over 60 minutes long. I think there is some really good stuff on this album, but I think one of the issues I have with it is there's probably 3 or 4 tracks on here that probably could have been left off. I think had this been an album from the 70s, from the classic Alice Cooper period, I think several of these songs probably would have ended up as B-side tracks and would have never made it on the full album. And I know I've mentioned it a couple of times on the channel here lately. Whenever I've talked about this album coming out, I just haven't been a fan of the album artwork. But after listening to it a couple of times, I think I understand kind of how it plays into the overall theme of the album. Because some of the songs on this album have that old school campy horror style to them, and the album artwork, I guess, plays into that theme. I think one of my biggest issues with using that kind of style on this album, kind of laying more into the more nostalgic end of their music, I think, had some of these songs been released 50 years ago, I think they might have played better. But, in 2025, I think some of them come off more like cartoonish than eerie. As far as the overall style of this album, I think the band might have been better served to do a more straightforward, modern sounding Alice Cooper album than doing this more nostalgic, hard rock blended with, post-punk and some psychedelic and some progressive rock elements. But I get it, that wasn't the point of this album. The point of this album was all the guys getting back together after 50 plus years and creating a new album. Whenever I do these album reviews, I always talk about the importance of an opening track and having that really strong track to pull listeners in, especially in the streaming era that we live in, where most people get their music off of their phones, and if you don't have a really good song or two to start an album, most people are just going to move on and listen to something else. So it's really important to start an album with one of your strongest tracks. I think starting an album with a really strong track not only sets the tone for the album, but I think in a lot of instances sets the expectations for the listener also. Because when it comes to entertainment today, people have very short attention spans, so you've really got to grab them right away, pull them in, and make them want to listen to more of the album. So the opening track on this album is Black Mamba. It's not only the opening track for the album, it was also the first single they released prior to the album coming out. And it has this almost Steven kind of style opening to the song before breaking into what I consider more of like a 70s funk rock style. And I think it's one of the few tracks on this album that comes really close to matching the sound and style of that early Alice Cooper band era. And I also think it's probably one of the best songs that Alice Cooper has written or co-written in a very long time. It was written with Alice, Bob Ezrin, and Michael Bruce. The song also features legendary guitarist Robbie Krieger from The Doors, and it has this like slinky kind of menacing tone to it. I think it's a really good track to reintroduce fans to the Alice Cooper band. It's a song that sounds like it could have come straight off of Killer, which is one of my favorite albums from Alice Cooper. You know, it's got that like theatrical darkness to the song. I think it really fits the narrative that they're trying to build on this album. The second track off the album is Wild Ones. It was also the second single that they released before the album came out. And I think musically, it's kind of similar to the opening track, Black Mamba, but it's got a little more of this like, almost like up-tempo kind of swagger to it. But it still retains a lot of that nostalgic feel, has that old school charm that those older Alice Cooper albums have. I think the song has a lot of that magic that made some of those older Alice Cooper albums so special. You know, it's one of the catchier songs on the album also. My issue with it is at times the song feels maybe a little too safe, a little bit too much like paint by numbers. But, you know, at this point in their career, 50 plus years later, I wouldn't expect a whole lot else from the band. At this point in their career, I don't expect them to push musical boundaries, be highly experimental with their music. They're just looking to create a good, solid rock album, and I think that's what they did. The third single was Up All Night, and it's got a little more of a bold tone and sound to the song. And I read somewhere that someone described this song as like a Sabbath meets Kiss kind of song, with its strong rhythm. Like it's got these like tongue-in-cheek kind of lyrics with it also, which I thought was a perfect description for this track. I think all three of the singles for this album were all very strong tracks, but I think Up All Night in some ways is just a little bit better than the other two. Even though I think the song Black Mamba works better overall in the context and placement on this album. So I understand the premise behind the song Kill the Flies, but I think out of all the tracks on this album, this is the one that I could say is a skippable track. Musically, it's okay. But lyrically, it's got this quirky kind of concept that I just don't think it lands the way the band intended it to. It has a similar kind of style to the song Ballad of Dwight Fry, as Alice playing this institutionalized character. This time he's being haunted by flies or by insects. It works in some ways. I just think it really comes off as something that's forced. And I could, like I said before, I could just do without the song. The song One Night Stand, I think really gets this album back on track. And Alice sings with this like deeper register, which I think really works on this track. The song focuses on Alice as this like dangerous kind of storyteller. And it's this kind of song that I think really showcases some of the strengths of Alice Cooper at this point in his career. He's really good with these like dark storytelling kind of songs. My only complaint with this song is it's a little short. I want to say it's like right over 3 minutes. I think it could have been a little bit longer, but then again, I'd rather have it be a shorter song and be really good than have it kind of drag on a little bit more and kind of weigh down the song. The first time through the album, the song Blood on the Sun, I wasn't a huge fan of. It's definitely grown on me the more I've listened to this album. And I think this song in particular really shows the strengths of Dennis Dunaway as a songwriter and why he was so instrumental in co-writing some of the band's biggest tracks, songs like I'm 18 and School's Out. And the song has this almost like progressive rock kind of style to it, at least progressive leanings to it. And the mostly instrumental end to the 6+ minute song feels like it's old school Alice Cooper rolled into this new era. I think it's easily another one of the standout tracks on this album. The song Crap That Gets in the Way of Your Dreams is a return to that kind of harder style that they used on the last couple of Alice Cooper band albums, $1 Billion Babies and Muscle of Love. That's another track where I think musically is really solid. It's a really good song, but lyrically, it just kind of lets them down a little bit. The song Famous Face is kind of interesting because it's a little different than some of the songs that came before it. It's a little more funkier. It's got a little more swagger to it. It's one of the more catchier tracks in this album also. A few people have mentioned that the vocal timing is a little off at times on this song, but I don't have an issue with it. I think it kind of lends itself to the style of the song and the style of the album. So while some people out there will ding this song because of that, I don't have an issue with it. I think it works just fine. Money Screams, I think, is another standout track on here. It's got this almost like Ramones kind of style to the song, which is something that, obviously when the band broke up in 73, the Ramones weren't a thing back then, but it's got the kind of style in this song, which the band did utilize at times earlier in their career, but I think has grown even stronger on this track. And if I were to pick my top 5 songs on this album, this would definitely be up towards the top of that. I think one of the more unique sounding songs on this album is the song What a Sit. It's got this like Gutter Cats versus the Jets meets Stray Cat Strut kind of vibe to it. And it's one that the first couple of times I listened to this album, I couldn't quite put my finger on what it sounded like. It took some time to kind of figure that out. It's got this like swingy, kind of jazzy vibe to the song. It's grown into one of my favorite tracks on here. Something that Alice Cooper used to do years and years ago on those early albums, and I think he's gotten away from as his career has gone on, is playing the harmonica on songs. But for the song Intergalactic Vagabond Blues, he breaks it out, and I think it's one of the highlights on the album. It's a fun and lighthearted kind of song with more of a straightforward kind of blues rock sound. And even though the lyrics are a little kind of corny at times, it sounds like something that the band would have created, 50 plus years ago. It has that same similar kind of style to it. The song What Happened to You is one of the songs where they took that old track, the old guitar riff from Glenn Buxton, and built the song around it. And I think out of any song on this album, this is the song that I think because of that has a little more of that like old school sound to it. Glenn's guitar on this song, I think gives it a different weight that really isn't there on any of the other songs on this album. It also makes me wonder, how different their sound would be now if Glenn was still alive. The song I Ain't Done Wrong, I think, is an example of a track that probably could have been left on the editing room floor. There's nothing specifically bad about it. It just, overall, I think it's kind of a forgettable song. It doesn't really add a whole lot to the album. And because I said that, I'm sure there's going to be lots of people that say, hey, that's my favorite song on this album, because that's always how it works. So the standard version of this album closes with the song See You on the Other Side, and it serves as kind of the emotional centerpiece for the album. It wraps up the album as a tribute not only to Glenn, but to what this band was earlier in his career. It might not be the heaviest or most energetic song that I was expecting to close the album, but I think it perfectly closes this chapter in the Alice Cooper story. Overall, when you sit down and listen to this album, this is not an album that's going to be trying to reinvent the wheel, but I think at times it could have been a little bit more of a consistent album. There's some tracks, like I said, probably should have been cut off and left off this album. But it's very apparent listening to this album, these guys still have chemistry together, and it's good to see them or hear them back together as a band. The album serves as a love letter to this older golden period from the band, and I think even at this later stage in their career, it shows that they can still craft some high quality, really catchy songs, even though sometimes they can come off as a little over the top cartoonish, maybe not quite up to the quality I think they should have, but it's still a really solid album. It's still a really good listen. Overall, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. I don't know. We'll see if the album grows on me a little bit more as the year goes on. But, I think it's probably a good number for it. So as far as owning a physical copy of this album, there's 2 different versions I know of. There's a black version. There's also a translucent yellow version. I ended up going with the yellow one. As far as the jacket, though, the jacket's the same between the two. So like I said earlier, I wasn't a huge fan of the album artwork, but the more I listen to this album, the more I understand where they're going with it theme-wise. But that's the front cover of it there. That's the back of the jacket. And then this is a gatefold with just the lyrics and credits in there, and then the artwork. And then this did have 2 inserts with it also. The first insert for disc 1, these are printed inner sleeves that the album comes in. You got the Alice Cooper side with the song lyrics on there. Then you've got a Michael Bruce side. And then the second album has a Dennis Dunaway side and a Neil Smith side. And as far as disc 1 and disc 2, they're the exact same, just a slightly different label on there. But there's side B and side A. And then side C and side D. I will say that this is cut at 45 RPM. I've already cleaned this up. Listened to it a couple of times. This album sounds absolutely fantastic. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of this new album, The Revenge of Alice Cooper. Have you listened to it yet? Have you bought a copy of it? What would you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10? Let me know what you guys think. Is this album as good as I wanted it to be? In some areas, yes. And in some areas, no. I think it's not the most consistent album across it, but it's still a really good album. We'll see where it ends at the end of the year on my top albums of the year list. But let me know what you guys think. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.